Next up, it's time for a look at our top business news. And for that, our business editor, Kate Moody, joins us. Hello, Kate. We're starting with the coronavirus. The number of infections across the United States continuing to rise, but there are some signs that more people are traveling. I imagine this is because of the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. I mean, are they just ignoring health warnings?
In some ways, yes, they are, Charlie. As you said, Thanksgiving is this Thursday. It is always the busiest travel week of the year in the United States. And this past weekend was no exception. Airport screenings hit their highest level in 8 months. The Transportation Security Administration said more than 1 million people boarded planes on both Friday and Sunday, just slightly fewer than 1 million on Saturday. Only on one other day since March has that million passenger mark been passed in American airports. Now, overall, the volume of air travel in the U.S. is around 2/3 lower than it was a year ago. These pre-Thanksgiving levels are still about down a little more than half compared to the same weekend in 2019. And while this is good news for the travel industry, health officials are really worried that it could lead to a post-Thanksgiving spike in coronavirus cases. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control last week urged Americans not to travel. It asked them to stay home. Now, it's not a requirement, as we've seen in many European countries, including here in France, but a recommendation as the U.S. is facing what the CDC describes as an exponential rise in infections, even before many families gather for this holiday tradition.
Okay, many airlines are taking steps to try to prevent the spread for travelers, whether that's limiting the capacity in the airlines, bless you there, whether that's limiting capacity in the airlines, leaving some space in the seats, or requiring pre-flight COVID tests. With all this talk of vaccines on the horizon, are some airlines considering requiring vaccines to travel?
Well, the chief executive of Qantas Airlines has said this Monday that international travelers on his carrier may be required to show proof that they have received a coronavirus vaccine once that vaccine is available on the market and once Australia's borders are reopened. Now, he said that many other airline bosses are considering similar measures, but Qantas is the first major airline to say that they could refuse passengers who haven't been vaccinated. Now, the travel industry in general is very invested in the development of a vaccine. And we've seen shares of airlines, cruise companies, hotel groups rising sharply when labs have reported progress in their research. Being able to prove their health status, whether it's with a vaccine or a negative COVID test, is really going to be key for travelers over the next year or so. United Airlines, has expanded its own pre-flight rapid testing. It's just expanded it this week for passengers flying from the U.S. to the Caribbean. Along with British and American Airlines, it's planning the same for certain transatlantic routes as well. And they're really hoping that governments will agree to accept these health checks in lieu of quarantine restrictions. They think that will help boost travel around the world, perhaps even before the pandemic is brought fully under control.
Finally, Kate, can you give us a look at how the stock markets have fared today?
Absolutely. Well, that first market euphoria that we saw a few weeks ago, welcoming the signs of a first vaccine breakthrough, has faded largely now this week. The major European indices closing flat, just slightly below the flat line this Monday. Wall Street, meanwhile, rallied after a mixed session. The Dow Jones closing 300 points higher. Investors welcomed some strong data about manufacturing and services activity in the United States, as well as reports that the U.S. President-elect Joe Biden is going to be naming Janet Yellen as his Treasury Secretary to replace Steve Mnuchin. The former head of the Federal Reserve is seen as an experienced choice to take on what will be the very challenging task of shepherding the United States out of this coronavirus recession, overseeing the possible next round of financial stimulus, and getting millions of people back to work.
Kate Moody there with our business update. Thank you so much. And I'm going to take a quick break, but do stay with us. I'll be back with more news in just a couple minutes.